In this video, I'm going to go through the reality of property investing, the things that property gurus don't want you to know, the things that they don't tell you. And the first issue I want to talk about, as you can see on the screen, is vacancy rates. Vacancy rates are on the rise, especially in places like Bendigo and Mildura and Melton. We can see that the vacancy rates have been rising, and that means you are going to have to pay more money out of pocket if you haven't found the tenant prior to settlement. And you have to remember there's a lot more competition these days, so there are more rental properties on the market, meaning it's harder to find a quality tenant and a tenant on time. For example, if I pulled up Melton, you can see that there's over 315 properties actually available for rent all throughout Melton South, Melton West, etc. So there's an abundant amount of properties available to rent, which means finding the tenant is going to be harder, which means more vacancy period for you. And that's the reality. And what that means is if you have an unexpected vacancy, say it's $600 per rent, and the property is vacant for 3 weeks, that's $1,800 out of your pocket. And guess what? The bank is going to come to collect your mortgage. Even if it's vacant for 2 weeks, that's $1,200. And you still have that $3,000 mortgage repayment. These are things that property gurus don't talk about, that buyer's agents don't talk about. They always talk about the yield and the capital gain, but they don't talk about the reality of trying to find a tenant, get that property tenanted out, and then actually have an ongoing cash flow. So when you go to buy an investment property, make sure you can get that property tenanted out, talk to a property manager, be realistic about your expectation, the amount of rent you can achieve, how long the property is going to be vacant for, and account for that difference. Have buffers in place because this will suck. And if you want to avoid critical mistakes like this, like having a property vacant for too long, that's why you need to be part of the private community so we can set realistic expectations for you to have no fluff advice. There are over 280 members willing to help you achieve your goal. And there is so much value for $35 a month. So if you're feeling lost, unsure about where to invest next, jump in the private community. You have absolutely nothing to lose because I also have a 30-day money back guarantee. So if you don't find it useful, we can return your money. But I know you will because that's how much value there is in the private community. So make sure you jump in. There is so much resources there for you to utilize and buy your next investment. And so what other problems go on when having an investment property? And if you're a shrewd investor or a shrewd person watching my video, you would have noticed a tab up here about a rental property being absolutely trashed in Melbourne. And it's been left in a horrendous state, garbage everywhere, property damaged, walls damaged. And guess what? Who has to brunt that cost? The landlord, the person offering up that rental property. Now, some of you are going to say, yes, you have insurance for malicious damage by the tenant, for example. However, that person, that landlord, still has to go through the process of calling up insurance, getting this issue sorted out, and then cleaning up the property, then re-advertising the property for rent. This is the reality of property investing. And people who invest in Melbourne knows for a fact that Victoria does not help its landlords. Landlords are scrutinized in Melbourne, in Victoria, and if your property is trashed, good luck taking them to VCAT because they are never helpful. But this is a reality. So finding a quality tenant amongst vacancies is important because if you have a bad tenant in the property, your property is going to get trashed. And yes, there are ways to mitigate this from happening by assessing the person's quality, having rental references, making sure they have a decent income, making sure they have good references. But even then, stuff like this can happen. And this is the reality of being a landlord that people don't want to tell you about. But what other issues are there when you're purchasing an investment property? And let me tell you, the process of buying a property sometimes sucks. When you're buying in a hot market like Bendigo or like Dubbo, for example, which is sort of a warm market, there are a lot of properties that you think about buying. You go through the trade-offs, you go through the checklist. Okay, this property has a large tree, or this property is missing a carport or a garage. And when you're buying an investment property, you're going to go through a bunch of different properties, looking at the pros and cons of every single property. And then you have to actually put an offer on the property, and then you have to negotiate with the owner of the property or the sales agent to then get the offer accepted. And all throughout that process, you're spending weeks on weeks spending your time and your money. And guess what? It sucks because then you go through and you have your property accepted, and then you go do a building and pest report, and then you find that there are structural issues with the property. And that's the worst thing because once there's a structural issue like a significant crack on a wall or a covering like what you can see on this building and pest report, that means you can't buy that property. And not only have you wasted 3 or 4 weeks looking for the property and then found the property, had your offer accepted, just to find out the building and pest report comes out with a major structural issue that you cannot continue with, you've wasted so much time. Now, of course, it's not wasted time, but that just goes to show how tedious the process can be. Not only that, you would have spent about $800 on the BNP report, which means that's money out of your pocket and you can't get that back. And then guess what? You have to go in and do that process all over again. And it sucks. So when property gurus or buyers agents make buying investment property an easy task, let me tell you, it's not. To find a good investment property in a good location for the right price, it takes time, it takes due diligence, it takes patience. And most people, quite frankly, don't have that. And so, if you're serious about investing, I want you to know the reality of investing because there is so much false advertising out there at this point in time that it just hurts to see that people get this false hope, this false dream that buying an investment property, in 2 weeks and then making $100,000 of growth overnight is some reality. It's not. It takes time and patience. And guess what? There's even more things that go wrong when investing in property. And this is the reality of it. Not only do you have all the acquisition cost, the purchase cost, the due diligence, and the time taken to do all that research and then buy the property, but there's also things like ongoing maintenance because that's never talked about for some reason. There are so many small maintenance items that can eat away at your cash flow. For example, you could have a leaky toilet or a shower that's leaking water. You can have grout coming up, mold. You may have a tree branch that has fallen on a fence that has damaged the fence, and now you have to work with the next door neighbor to get that sorted out. The tenant might request a new security door or fly screens. Your tenant might break the lease, and then you have to deal with that. And even though they have bond, you still have to account for the vacancy period. And all of these things can happen, and this adds to your maintenance cost. So 1 year, your maintenance cost be $1,000. The other year, it could be $2,000. The other year, it could be $3,000, and 1 year could be $500. And this all impacts your cash flow. And so you need to have buffers. And for every single investment property I have, I like to have $10,000 saved up in a bank somewhere or able to withdraw out of equity to then sort out those issues. Because if something does go wrong, and by the way, it's not if something goes wrong, it's when something goes wrong. Are you prepared? And if your buyer's agent or your property guru doesn't tell you these things, then they are not setting you up for success. And that is a red flag. And by the way, the more investment properties you own, the bigger the potential issues can be. Because when you have 2, 3, 4 investment properties, in one property, a tree might fall down. In the other property, the tenant might leave and then break the lease. In the other property, the toilet might start leaking. And in the fourth property, everything is fine, no issues. And all of these issues can literally happen in 1 month, and it's a horrible time for you. But if you are prepared and you give yourself that runway, it will make it easier for you. And so if you are a smart property investor, make sure you have a cash buffer. Understand that you will have maintenance issues. Understand that your tenant may break the lease. Be prepared for that because otherwise you will put yourself and your family in financial stress. Now, the other issue that I want to talk about regarding the reality of property investing is that every single buyer's agent, every single person talks about equity growth and capital growth. And while this is true, there are some nuance to this. Say you bought a property for $500,000, right? And that property grew in value to $600,000. Now that, my friend, is equity. You have about $100,000 in equity, right? That's not cash, right? That's not cash sitting in your bank that you can go buy a BMW with. That is money trapped against the asset that you purchased, all right? But then the reality is when you try to go sell the $600,000 home, quote unquote, you will then have selling fees, you'll have capital gains tax, you'll have agent costs, you'll have marketing costs, you'll have conveyancer costs, and that $100,000 growth that you may see on surface level may not actually be that much. And this is why a lot of people just utilize that equity to go and buy a future investment property because property transaction costs are so high, it doesn't make selling that appealing. However, this is the reality of it. So yes, you made $100,000 of growth, but in turn, if you really wanted to sell that and liquidate that, you're not going to be left with $100,000. So I want that to really set in for you guys and understand that is a reality of property investing. And by the way, just because one bank values it at $600,000 doesn't mean that the other bank is also going to value it at $600,000. The other bank might value at $580K. One bank might value it at $550K. But the real value of your property will always be determined by the market. So So when you take this $600,000 property the bank valued at and you take it to market, will the market pay you 600 grand? That is the real test. So please understand that even though buyers didn't talk about $100,000 worth of growth in 12 months, what does that really mean to you? Because I tell you right now, you're not going to feel much richer. You're not going to feel like you're well off. It's not going to feel like you made $1 million, right? It's not going to feel like you're rich overnight. Now, I feel like I've made this video very doom and gloom about property investing, but all I wanted to do was set the reality for you because I feel like in today's day and age, with all these buyers and all this marketing and all these property gurus and all these podcasts, they make investing in property something so easy and something that you can make 100 grand over 2 months or 3 months. That's not reality. You need patience, you need grit, and you need perseverance. And if you want to build a long-term property portfolio, then jump into the private community. We will help you out. There's no bullshit marketing. It is pure help, no fluff advice. It's over 280 people. There are so many people who have bought investment properties and benefited massively from it. There's over 46 reviews. Go please read them. And the link will be left down below so you can do your own research. Till next time, thank you very much.